Hi class, this is our first video to go over the sentence structure activity that I asked you guys to complete online. So far, I just want to say thank you to the three of you for participating because I really didn't know if this was going to be successful, and so far we're on a good, off to a good start. So that's actually really a relief for me because it means that I can do this again in the future. So this is ever so often I might post a video instead of having to type everything out to explain things. I think it's just easier and more entertaining than to have you have to read everything to get your answers. So let's just go through the activity now. If you have any questions about it specifically after I go over it, and I will post the groupings of the sentences online on the discussion so that you can read them yourself. Just post to the discussion if you have any questions about any of the explanation that I'm going to give you right now. So the purpose of this activity really was to figure out what is a sentence. That's the goal of what I was asking you to do and what the questions were really trying to help you ascertain. So the definition of a complete sentence is also called an independent clause. An independent clause is just a clause in English that contains a subject, a verb, and expresses a complete thought. Those are your three, we can call them elements of a complete sentence. The difference between an independent clause, which is something that is, like I said before, complete, and a dependent clause. A dependent clause obviously depends on something else. What do you think it is? It depends on a complete sentence to help support it. And the difference is that where an independent clause will have a subject, a verb, and express a complete thought, a dependent clause will have a subject and a verb, but it won't express a complete thought. And dependent clauses can be started with words that we call subordinate conjunctions. And a subordinate conjunction is a word like because, or although, after, during, before, words that will tend to start a sentence or start that clause to introduce an idea, but the idea itself is not expressed completely without another idea attached to it. And so that's really the difference between the independent clause and the dependent clause. The two other things that you might have seen by doing this activity is the difference between the clauses and a phrase. And a phrase is just a grouping of words. And the difference is that a phrase doesn't necessarily have a subject or a verb. It's just a group of words, and that's it. Although it may have a verb, but there definitely won't be a subject. And the last thing is just a word, just a plain old simple word. And the words that you guys saw in this activity were things called interjections. An interjection is just something that is stated to get somebody's attention. So I'm going to go through all of these now, the bulleted sentences or phrases or clauses, whatever we want to call them for now, and just go through and show you what the subject is, what the verb was, and then maybe help you understand why it is a complete expression of thought if it is an independent clause, and if it's a dependent clause, why it's not complete. I think, just by looking at what you posted online, I think you understood that it was clear that there were some things that were complete expressions and some things that were not complete expressions. And then there were a couple where you were kind of maybe on the fence about them. So let's just start with the first one. The first one says, it's a question. It says, can you call me? Right? Well, if I'm looking for your subject, which is really what question one is asking, it's asking for the person, place, or thing that is central to the meaning of what the writer is trying to express. In other words, the word that focuses on one person, place, or thing that is doing something or is being described. Okay, that's the subject of a sentence. The who or what is doing something or being described in a sentence. So if we look at the sentence, can you call me? The subject here is you. Your verb, and there's a couple of kinds of verbs in English, is call, right, along with the modal can, and the complete expression is me, right? Can you call me? So if we were in a conversation and I said, hey, can you call me? And you would understand that you'd have to say, yes, I can, or no, I can't. So that's the complete expression of thought. You've got a subject, you've got a verb, expresses a complete thought. That means that that's an independent clause, it's a complete sentence, it's done, even though it's a question. All right. Now you got to compare that one to the next one. The next one says, because I said so. This is a dependent clause. So where the independent clause, again, right, the complete sentence has a subject, a verb, and expresses a complete thought, the dependent clause will have a subject, it will have a verb, but it does not express a complete thought, and that's the difference. So here we have I as the subject, said as the verb, but there's no complete thought. Why? What is because I said so? What is it attached to, right? You can't go outside because I said so, right? Put on your coat because I said so. That why you're linking because here, because when you have because, it's got to be linked to something else. Causation, shows causation, right? That thing that it's attached to is not there, so that's why it's not complete. That word because is something that we call a subordinate conjunction. And subordinate conjunctions, I think I just said this before, words like because, after, during, although, right? They introduce a lesser idea, okay? It's a link, but one idea is lesser than the other idea in the sentence. So whenever you see that subordinate word, you know that you are dealing with a dependent clause, okay? Let's look at the word stop. All right, now stop is an interesting one because many people don't know what stop is. Stop is actually a complete sentence, and you probably didn't know this. It's a command, right? It's a complete sentence because you have the verb, which is obviously stop, and you have a subject, but the subject is not written in the statement. The subject is an understood subject, meaning if I were to say to you stop, and I were talking to you as the person receiving that interaction, the person receiving my message, would understand what you had to do. So that's why you are the perceived or not stated, all right, subject. We call this kind of subject you understood, and they show up in commands. So the word, stop, that command itself is also a complete sentence. Got a subject, verb expresses complete thought. Next, although she declared her innocence. Okay, well, you've got your subject, she. You've got your verb declared, but it doesn't express a complete thought. Although she declared her innocence, she was, burned at the stake. I've been watching a lot of American Horror Story, right? And you've got the word although. Although is just like because. It's a subordinate conjunction. It's starting a dependent clause. So I know that expression is not going to be complete as soon as I see the word although, and I don't have a dependent clause that follows it, independent clause that follows it, something to help prop it up. There was an old woman who lived in a shoe. Okay, this one also an old woman, that's your subject, right? Your verb here is was. And this is what is interesting, and this is why I include this in the in your sentences here to take a look at. The word there in that sentence is doing nothing more but to start the sentence. It doesn't function as anything else but to just start the sentence in English. Your real subject is actually coming after the main verb was, and you want to try to avoid this construction. There was, there is, there were, there are, right? Get rid of those, because all that's happening is that you're delaying the real subject. The real subject in the sentence is an old woman. So you want to put her first, right? Don't throw her after the verb. An old woman, we could revise this and we could say an old woman lived in a shoe, right? Put my subject up front, move my verb, nice, healthy, hearty action verb, we put that up front, and it's expressing the same idea, but I've just cut down on words. Now, why should you even care at this point about cutting down on words? You're probably in the middle of either writing your closed memo, maybe I think that's due next week. You're going to have your open memo due, and you're going to do your brief next semester. You will quickly find out that if you're not clever enough to pick out these kinds of things and start eliminating them now, you're going to run out of space, and you're going to feel like you can't say everything that you want to say in 10, 12 pages, whatever the limit's going to be. Start getting out of the habit of using or depending on there is, there was, there were, there are to start your sentences, and just start putting your subjects up front and using action verbs. An action verb is any verb that shows action, okay? Judge, I judge, not the person, judge, dictate, state, said, okay, anything like that. Anything that shows action, jump, hop, skip, whatever, all right? You want to use those kinds of verbs. I'm going to ignore that right now. I hope you ignore it too with me. The next thing is before she was famous. Okay, before she was famous is another dependent clause. It has a subject, she, it has a verb, was, and it has a subordinate conjunction, before. It doesn't express a complete thought because before she was famous, what? Before she was famous, she waited tables. Something like that. That complete expression is not there. Okay, Baba Booey. Baba Booey is if you guys ever listen to Howard Stern or know anything about I'm kind of a Howard Stern fan, but don't tell anyone that, please. Okay, Baba Booey is just an interjection. An interjection is just a word. It's something that you say to, you know, it's an excited kind of word. It's to grab attention, let's say, right? Baba Booey, really popular at PGA tournaments right after somebody takes a golf swing, right? Not a big deal, just a single word. Next, after being wrongfully convicted for the murder of his wife. Here, this is your phrase, okay? We only have one of them in the grouping. You may notice that it has a verb, convicted, right? But what you're lacking here is the subject. And the subject here would be the person who was being convicted, probably the husband if it's his wife, right? So the person who's actually doing that verb, or is, you know, the person who is being convicted, is not stated in there, which means it's lacking a subject, which means it can't be a dependent clause. It has to be a phrase. And notice that after, okay, another one of your subordinate conjunctions in there. Hey. Hey is not a sentence. Hey is just another interjection. It's just like Baba Booey. And the last one, I feel like I'm going crazy. I is your subject, feel is your verb, and it expresses a complete thought. What do I feel like? I feel like I'm going crazy, which sometimes I do. So that is the exercise. That was the point of the exercise. I hope you kind of understand it now and see what the purpose of it really is. It's important to know this kind of thing. You know, it's something that may seem very basic, but when we do commas and other kinds of punctuation, it's important to know what is the complete sentence versus what is not a complete sentence, because without really knowing that, the rules for punctuation won't make too much sense. And without being able to recognize what a subject and verb is, we can't do subject-verb agreement and blah, blah, blah as we go on. So again, if you guys have any questions about the activity, please let me know. I hope this is helpful. I hope you're rocking law school so far. I'll be online. See you there.